Mommy, look. She looks just like Grandma from the hidden photos. Nathan's words, her 5-year-old son, hit Sarah like a bolt of lightning in the middle of the shopping mall parking lot. The world around her seemed to slow to a near stop as her heart raced in a frantic sprint against time. A few meters away, loading bags into the trunk of a silver car, stood Elizabeth, her mother, the woman she had fled from 5 years earlier. Sarah tried to move, but her feet felt glued to the ground. The shopping mall's icy air conditioning blew against her back through the automatic doors, but all she felt was heat, a suffocating warmth that transported her back to that night 5 years ago when she discovered she was pregnant. Nathan, oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions his innocent observation had triggered, was already running toward the grandmother he had never met. "Grandma, I knew it was you." Elizabeth looked up at the sound of the child's voice, and time truly stopped. Sarah saw the exact moment recognition crossed her mother's face. First surprise, then an understanding that made her hands tremble, causing one of the bags to fall to the ground. 5 years ago, on that night that would change everything, Sarah had stared at a positive pregnancy test in the bathroom of her home. At 19, those 2 pink lines didn't just represent a baby, they heralded a storm that would sweep away her neat, predictable life forever. The Aldrich family was known for their impeccable discipline and unwavering traditional values. Elizabeth, a respected teacher and fierce guardian of the family's reputation, and Robert, her father, with his authoritative presence and rigid opinions, had built a world of suffocating expectations around her. Sarah could still taste the bitterness of that last family dinner when she sat at the table carrying her secret. The food had turned to ash in her mouth as she listened to her parents talk about her bright future in medical school, about responsibility and dedication. "Sarah, dear, you're so quiet," Elizabeth had remarked that evening, her sharp eyes studying her daughter's face. Now, 5 years later, those same eyes were studying little Nathan, who smiled with the same innocence Sarah once had. The decision to leave had been made that very night, between silent tears and frantic searches for bus tickets to distant cities. The fear of the unknown was overwhelming, but the terror of facing the disappointment in her parents' eyes was even greater. Sarah had sworn that her son would grow up free from the crushing weight of expectations she had carried for so long. And now, 5 years later, all her careful planning, all the precautions to keep her distance, all the effort to protect Nathan from the judgments she so feared, everything was unraveling in a chance encounter in a shopping mall parking lot. "Sarah?" Elizabeth's voice trembled as she spoke her name, a single word carrying 5 years of absence, unanswered questions and sleepless nights. Nathan was already at his grandmother's side, his eyes shining with the pure joy of a child. "You look just like the pictures Mommy keeps in her special box." Sarah felt her legs weaken. Those pictures, her only link to the past, kept in a small shoebox at the back of her closet, were her most precious secret, the only memory she allowed herself to preserve of her previous life. And now her son, with the piercing honesty of children, was exposing that secret in front of the very person she had tried to hide it from. The moment of decision had come. Sarah could pick Nathan up and flee again, perpetuating the cycle of silences and absences. Or she could stay and face the ghost that had haunted her for 5 years. In the space between those two choices, between mother and daughter, past and present, fear and hope, a new story waited to be written. The noise of the mall continued around them, distant conversations, hurried footsteps, shopping carts in motion. But Sarah and Elizabeth remained trapped in their own bubble of time, where 5 years of distance condensed into a single moment. "Does he have his father's eyes?" Elizabeth asked softly, her voice carrying a mix of curiosity and contained pain. The question caught Sarah off guard. It wasn't an accusation as she had always feared, but rather a genuine desire to know the grandson she never knew existed. "No," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "He has Grandpa Robert's eyes." The words escaped before she could stop them, and with them came the first crack in the wall she had built around herself. Nathan, still holding his grandmother's hand, looked back and forth between them with the curiosity typical of children. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Sarah hadn't noticed the tears starting to stream down her face. Elizabeth took a hesitant step toward her, still keeping a bit of distance, as if fearing that any sudden movement might make her daughter disappear again. "There's a cafe inside," Elizabeth suggested, pointing to the mall. Maybe we could talk for a bit? Nathan could have some hot chocolate." The mention of hot chocolate lit up the boy's face. "Can we, Mommy? Please." Sarah felt the familiar weight of responsibility on her shoulders, not just for her own choices, but now for the impact they would have on her son's life. For 5 years she had protected Nathan from anything that might hurt him, including his own family. But looking at his hopeful face, she realized that perhaps she had been protecting herself just as much as him. The cafe was a cozy space, with soft music and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. They chose a quiet table in the corner, Nathan seated between them with his hot chocolate and a cookie that Elizabeth insisted on buying, her first gift as a grandmother. "Your father?" Elizabeth began, hesitantly stirring her coffee without actually drinking it. "He was never the same after you left. We spent months looking for you. We hired detectives, called hospitals, checked every medical school in the country." Sarah felt her heart tighten. "I couldn't stay," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "You had so many plans for me, so many expectations. The disappointment in your eyes. I couldn't bear it. And you thought it would be better to leave us with the pain of your absence?" Elizabeth asked, but there was no accusation in her voice, only a deep sadness. "Sarah, you were our only child. Our plans, our expectations. None of that mattered more than you." Nathan, engrossed in his cookie, seemed unaware of the intensity of the conversation around him, but his eyes occasionally drifted to his grandmother with growing curiosity. Elizabeth noticed his gaze and smiled kindly. "You know, I have an album full of pictures of your mom when she was your age," she said to Nathan. "She used to love wearing a red cape and pretending to be a superhero." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. That red cape, her father had made it for her 6th birthday. It was a memory she had buried deep, along with so many others. "Mommy is a superhero now too," Nathan declared proudly. "She works at the hospital and helps people get better." Elizabeth looked at Sarah with surprise and a hint of pride. "You stayed in medicine?" "Not exactly," Sarah replied, a small smile forming on her lips. "I'm a pediatric nurse. It's not what you had planned, but it's perfect for you," Elizabeth finished, and for the first time that afternoon, her words carried genuine understanding. "You always had a special gift with children." The silence that followed was no longer tense but full of possibilities. On Elizabeth's face, Sarah could see a reflection of her own internal struggle, the desire to reclaim lost time competing with the fear of saying or doing the wrong thing. "I'm not asking you to come back home," Elizabeth said finally. "I'm just asking for a chance to get to know my grandson, to reconnect with my daughter. We can take it slow at your pace." Sarah looked at Nathan, who was now drawing shapes in the foam of his hot chocolate, creating tiny swirls of unconscious happiness. 5 years ago, she had run to protect him from a world of judgment and expectations. Now she realized it might be time to give him the chance to know an important part of his story. The late afternoon sun spilled golden light through the cafe windows as Elizabeth pulled a small wallet from her purse. With slightly trembling hands, she took out a worn photograph. Sarah immediately recognized the moment captured in the image. Her 10th birthday, smiling beside a cake covered in strawberries, her favorite fruit. "I've carried this photo with me for 5 years, Elizabeth said softly, running her finger over the weathered surface of the photograph. "Sometimes, when the longing became too much, I take it out just to see your smile." Nathan leaned across the table, chocolate staining the corner of his mouth. "Mommy, you were little just like me?" Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. In her hurried escape, she had left behind not only her family but also all the physical memories of her childhood. The only photos she had were the few she had managed to save on her phone. "Your grandfather Robert," Elizabeth continued, her voice gaining strength, "redid your room 3 times in the past 5 years. First, he turned it into an office, saying he needed the space to work. Then he tried making it a library. Finally, he left it exactly as it was the day you left. I think it was his way of keeping the hope of your return alive." Sarah lowered her eyes to her cup of coffee, now cold and forgotten. The image of her father, always so strong and determined, reorganizing her room repeatedly as a way to cope with the pain of her absence, was almost too much to bear. "Nathan," Elizabeth turned to her grandson with a gentle smile, "your mom used to play the piano. She had magical fingers for music." "Really, Mommy? You never told me that." Nathan's eyes sparkled with this new discovery about his mother. "It's been so long," Sarah murmured, but her hands moved unconsciously, as if searching for the phantom keys of a piano long forgotten. "The piano is still there," Elizabeth commented. "No one has played it since you left. Your father keeps it tuned nonetheless." Each revelation was like a small door opening, giving Sarah glimpses of a life that had continued to exist even in her absence. A life where her parents, despite the rigidity and suffocating expectations that had driven her away, had never stopped loving her or hoping for her return. "At the hospital," Sarah began hesitantly, "there's an old piano in the pediatric ward. Sometimes when the kids can't sleep, I play for them. Nothing too fancy, just a few simple melodies I still remember. Elizabeth's face lit up at this small confession. It was the first time Sarah had willingly shared something about her current life. "Grandma," Nathan suddenly asked, "do you know how to bake cookies?" "Mommy always burns the cookies." Elizabeth's surprised laughter filled the air, and Sarah found herself smiling too, remembering her own disastrous attempts in the kitchen. "Yes, dear," Elizabeth replied, "and I've kept all your mom's recipes. Even the strawberry cake from the birthday in the picture. Maybe someday?" She left the sentence unfinished, like a bridge extended over the chasm of lost years. Sarah felt the weight of that possibility, not a demand but a gentle invitation to reconnect with her past. "Nathan's birthday is next month," Sarah found herself saying, surprising even herself. Maybe you could bake the cake. If you'd like to, of course." The words hung between them like a peace offering, a small step toward something new. Elizabeth nodded silently, unshed tears glistening in her eyes. "You know," Elizabeth said after a moment, "your father is retiring next week. After 40 years at the same law firm, he finally decided to stop. I think he's realized there are more important things in life than work and reputation." Sarah absorbed this information, thinking about how her father, so devoted to his career and appearances, was changing. Perhaps all of them were different now, shaped by the pain of separation but also by the possibility of healing. The news of Robert's retirement stirred memories of Sarah's childhood. Quiet afternoons when her father would return from the office, still in his impeccable suit, and sit in his favorite armchair to read the newspaper. He had always seemed so distant, so immersed in his world of responsibilities and expectations. "Your father asks about you every night before bed," Elizabeth revealed, her voice soft. "He keeps every newspaper that mentions any Sarah who's a nurse. He has a folder full of them in his office." Nathan, having finished his hot chocolate, was now playing with a small toy car Elizabeth had bought him from the mall's toy store. The sound of his motor imitations filled the silences between the unspoken words. "Mommy told me Grandpa is a lawyer," Nathan said, looking up from his toy. "Does he help people like superheroes?" Sarah felt her heart tighten. Her son had grown up knowing only fragments of his family, carefully curated stories that didn't reveal the pain of the past. "Yes, sweetheart," Elizabeth replied, seizing the opportunity to share more about the grandfather Nathan had never met. "And did you know he's always wanted a grandson to teach chess? He has a special chessboard that he's kept for years." Sarah remembered the chessboard, a gift her father had received from his own father, intricately carved with delicate details. Robert had always said he would pass it down one day, keeping the family tradition alive. "Nathan loves board games," Sarah found herself saying again, surprising herself. "Every night before bed we play a little. It's our special ritual." Elizabeth's face lit up with that information, as if every little detail about her grandson was a precious treasure to be cherished. "Your father?" Elizabeth hesitated for a moment. "He's at the office right now, organizing his final tasks before retiring. The office is just 10 minutes from here." The air between them grew heavy with the weight of that information. Sarah felt her heart race. Reconnecting with her mother was one thing. Her mother had always been the more understanding of the two. But her father? Robert Aldrich was a man of rigid principles and carefully measured words. "He's changed, Sarah," Elizabeth continued, as if reading her daughter's thoughts. "You're leaving?" It broke him in ways I never thought possible. He learned the hard way that some things are more important than tradition and expectations. Nathan, sensing the shift in the tone of the conversation, set his toy car aside and climbed onto Sarah's lap, wrapping her in a protective hug. That was how they had always been, protecting each other, serving as each other's safe harbor. "He might not know how to say it," Elizabeth continued, "but your father never stopped loving you. That armchair of his? He still turns it toward the door every night, as if he's waiting for you to walk in at any moment." Sarah felt tears burn her eyes. How many nights had she dreamed of that armchair, the familiar smell of her father's office, the soft sound of newspaper pages being turned? "Maybe," Sarah began, her voice trembling slightly, "maybe we could stop by. Just to see. Nathan could meet his grandfather and—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Elizabeth was already reaching for her phone, her fingers hovering over the keypad. "Can I call him?" Elizabeth asked, her voice filled with hope. "Just to let him know we're coming. To give him a moment to prepare." Sarah nodded, holding Nathan tighter in her arms. Her son, sensing her tension, kissed her cheek in the sweet way he always did when he saw her sad. "It'll be okay, Mommy," he whispered in her ear. "Grandma said Grandpa likes chess just like us." People who like chess are nice. Sarah couldn't help but smile through her tears. Somehow, her little boy had inherited a wisdom she was still struggling to find. The law office was housed in an old brick building with large windows that reflected the afternoon sun. Sarah sat in the car for a moment with Elizabeth and Nathan, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. "He's waiting on the top floor," Elizabeth said softly. "When I called." "Sarah, I'd never heard your father cry before." Nathan held his new toy car in one hand and Sarah's hand in the other, his small and steady presence anchoring her amidst the storm of emotions she was navigating. The elevator rose slowly, each floor marking a beat in Sarah's racing heart. Nathan counted the numbers out loud, turning the tense ride into a little adventure. 5, 6, 7, he announced with childlike enthusiasm. The doors opened to a silent hallway. On the wall, a gold plaque read Aldrich and Associates. Sarah felt the weight of that name, her own name, that she had tried so hard to leave behind. Elizabeth guided them to a wooden door at the end of the corridor. Through the frosted glass, Sarah could see the silhouette of a man standing by the window. Robert had always been a tall man, his presence filling any room he entered. But the figure she saw now seemed smaller, as though years and sadness had bowed his shoulders. When the door opened, time seemed to slow. Robert turned around slowly, and Sarah saw the changes 5 years had wrought. His hair, once just streaked with gray, was now completely white. New lines marked his face, each one telling stories of sleepless nights and silent worries. "Dad?" The word escaped Sarah's lips like a whispered prayer. Robert took a step toward her, his eyes first locking onto hers, then shifting to Nathan. His hands trembled slightly at his sides. Those same hands Sarah remembered as always steady, whether signing important documents or gesturing during his lectures on responsibility and duty. "You have her eyes," he said to Nathan, his voice hoarse with emotion. "The same eyes your mother had when she was a child." Still holding Sarah's hand, Nathan looked at his grandfather with open curiosity. "Grandma said you have a special chessboard?" A trembling smile crossed Robert's face. "Yes, I do. It belonged to my father and his father before him." He walked over to an old bookshelf and carefully retrieved a carved wooden box. "I always hoped I could." His voice broke and Sarah saw something she never thought she would, tears in her father's eyes. Robert Aldrich, the man who always declared, "Aldriches don't cry," stood there vulnerable and exposed. "Sarah," he said, placing the chessboard on his desk, "5 years ago that night, I was wrong. So terribly wrong about so many things. Dad, No," he gently interrupted. "Let me say this. I've rehearsed these words for 5 years. Every day I relived that night, wishing I had acted differently. Wishing I had been the father you needed, not the father I thought I should be." Nathan let go of Sarah's hand and walked over to the desk, captivated by the chessboard. Robert watched him with a look that mingled wonder and sadness. Sadness for the years lost, wonder at the unexpected chance to meet his grandson. "This chessboard," Robert continued, opening the box with reverent care, "has been in our family for 5 generations. Every piece tells a story." He picked up the Black King, holding it up to the light. "See these marks here? They were made by my grandfather during the war. He played chess to keep hope alive." Sarah slowly approached the desk, watching her father show the chessboard to Nathan. In every gentle gesture, in every careful word, she saw a man who was different from the one she had left behind. A man whom time and pain had taught to value what truly mattered. The sun was beginning to set, painting the office in golden hues through the large windows. Nathan sat in the leather chair behind Robert's desk, his small hands carefully exploring each chess piece as his grandfather patiently explained their names and moves. "This is the queen," Robert explained, his voice soft, carrying a gentleness Sarah had never known. "She's the most powerful piece in the game, able to move in any direction." "Just like Mommy?" Nathan exclaimed with childish conviction. "She can do everything too." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes again as she saw her father smile. A genuine smile that completely transformed his face. Elizabeth stood beside her, holding her hand, silently sharing this precious moment. "Sarah," Robert said, turning to her, "there's something I need to show you." He walked over to an old cabinet in the corner of the office and retrieved a worn cardboard box. "Every month since you left, I bought something for you and, well, I didn't know it would be a grandson, but somehow I always believed you'd come back with a family of your own." With trembling hands he opened the box. Inside were children's books, small wrapped gifts, unsent birthday cards, 5 years of quiet love, preserved in the hope of a reunion. "This one," he said, picking up a specific package, I bought the day I realized I had lost something far more precious than reputation or tradition. It was your 20th birthday, and for the first time in my life I couldn't give you a hug." Sarah carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was a delicate necklace with a pendant shaped like a musical note. "Dad. You always loved music," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I remember how your eyes lit up when you played the piano. I was so focused on trying to shape you into my vision of success that I forgot to simply see you for who you were." Robert took a step toward her, his eyes fixed first on her, then on Nathan. His hands trembled slightly at his sides. Those hands that Sarah always remembered as steady when signing important documents or gesturing during his lectures on responsibility and duty. "You have her eyes," he said to Nathan, his voice hoarse with emotion. "The same eyes your mother had when she was a child." Nathan, still holding Sarah's hand, looked at his grandfather with open curiosity. "Grandma said you have a special chessboard?" A trembling smile